For those who had real life celebrity encounters, who was rude and who was actually nice? Met Viggo Mortensen quite a handful of times as he used to go to the restaurant I managed at the time. He was one of the nicest, most down-to-earth celebrities we had. He would, after we offered, join us for dinner once the restaurant had closed and would bring small gifts every time for everyone. I have two. The first is Jerry Springer. I met him while traveling when we happened to be staying at the same hotel. He was super nice. Took photos and answered questions. All smiles and jokes. The second is Steven Spielberg. I met him at some benefit I got invited to as a teen due to having good grades or some shit, and he not only had a super normal convo with me, but when I told him where I really wanted to work, but hadn't been able to get an interview, he took me to the next table where the company's CEO was and introduced me. Worked there for 5 years after. Bruce Campbell. Awesome dude. Met Mr. Rogers years ago in a drugstore. He was super nice to the several people that had been quietly following him around the store. His wife, on the other hand, seemed annoyed with it. We never deserved him. Stone Cold Steve Austin found my dog that ran away and picked him up off of the highway. He ended up cleaning up our dog and gave him tons of toys before we got him back. Rob Lowe. Met him at a kid's party. He's related to a kid that was at my kid's daycare. Awesome guy. Very friendly. Jay Leno. I've met and observed him at the Rock store many times. Always a nice guy. Friendly. Love the guy. This is literally. Chris Hemsworth and Scarlett Johansson regularly frequented the restaurant I work at for a bit. And they are both genuinely awesome people. Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis were way too preoccupied when they came in to even acknowledge my presence of trying to wait on them. I've posted this before, but I once spilled a very large, very colorful drink on Kate Hudson. My girlfriend and I ended up in a VIP area at a music festival totally by accident. We weren't supposed to be there but walked right in not knowing it was restricted, and since we were there we decided to stay. We ended up in a corner as to not draw attention to ourselves, and I would walk over to the bar occasionally to get us drinks and bring them back. A few hours and more than a few rounds later, my girlfriend decided she had to have one of the plastic yard glasses of margaritas that they were selling. So I attempted to bring back one and a few beers on my next trip. I made it within 10 feet of where we were stationed when I sidestepped a dancing girl, tripped, and spilled the entire yard glass on a woman. When she turned around, I realized that the woman that I had just soaked was Kate Hudson. She was incredibly awesome about it. And luckily my girlfriend had an extra shirt with her that she could change into. A coworker noticed Robin Williams flipping through a book quietly at a bookstore I worked at. It was during the filming of Good Will Hunting, so he had a beard and wasn't so recognizable. She said, "I think that's Robin Williams." He looked up from his book, smiled, and then put a finger to his mouth. SHHHH. Rory Mccann, the Hound from Game of Thrones. He was in Sydney, and I figured I never get this opportunity any other time. So I went up to him. He was very nice and shook my hand. He didn't want a photo, but not a big deal. Was just cool to meet him. And this was like a few days right after his chicken episode where he was like, "I understand that if any more words come pouring out your CNT mouth." He did an interview where he said fans ask him to tell them to duck off. Diane Keaton. I was with my husband and kids at the beach where she owns a home. She complimented our beautiful children and was very friendly. My husband didn't realize who it was until she was gone, and I told him. Shared an elevator with Beyonce back in the early 2000s when she was doing the Destiny's Child farewell tour. It was my dad, me, Beyonce, and a hulking bodyguard. My dad, being my dad, didn't know who she was and assumed they were a married couple and gave the man crap about carrying all the bags himself. She laughed. He kinda giggled a bit and they looked at each other awkwardly. Then they hopped off the elevator and walked straight onto a tour bus with her face plastered on the side, at which point my dad asked, "Wait, who is that? 5/7 would share an elevator again." Jaden Smith wouldn't leave my store 30 minutes after we closed. Neither would his security guard, the girl he was with, or the 8 or 9 other girls that were clearly asked to stay at least 30 feet away from him. He kept saying, "Bro, it's cool. Don't worry. Bro, it's cool. It's cool. Duck you, Jaden. There are about 20 people in this store that can't go home until you get your stupid entitled ass out of here." Edit. The next day he accused a hotel down the street of trying to poison him with cheese in his pancakes, ricotta in his crepes. Edit 2. Just to clear a couple of things up. He did eventually leave about 10 minutes after I asked, but not before finishing his shopping and hold up our staff. And unfortunately our store leadership will bend over backwards. They won't call security or back me up in the removing of late shoppers for pretty much anyone. So unless I could convince Jaden to leave, they'd have let him keep shopping. I went through an airport security line with Keanu Reeves. He was super cool and open for about a 5 minutes conversation. They had closed the line behind him, so it was really just the two of us for a bit. He was even good natured when I asked if I could take a selfie with him. Good dude. Once we got through the line, a crowd gathered quickly and security whisked him away. I'm sure this will come as no surprise, but John Cena is one of the nicest and naturally awesome people in existence. He came to visit the new enlisted rec center they built for us back in the mid-zeros to do a meet and greet, while he was only booked to be there from 1,400 to 1,600. When we told him that most of the sub-school students didn't get out class until then, he said he'd be more than willing to stay later. He hung out with all the guys who came to see him shooting pool, playing darts and Xbox, and pretty much signing everything and taking a ton of pictures. The dude is just a straight up class act. Bruce Willis. I was a Nick taxi driver and I pick him up at a restaurant very late at night. He starts asking me all these questions about the long hours, how much a good cabbie makes a night, etc. He asks me if I am married. I say yes. Asks about my wife. I tell him marriage is great but we aren't together much due to the long hours I drive the cab. We get to his place. Hands me $1,000 and says, "Now go take a week off and spend it with your wife." True story. David Beckham. I didn't know who he was at the time. I was staying at the Grand Hyatt in Hong Kong and Galaxy was there for an exhibition game. There were a lot of fangirls outside with posters and tea in the roped off area near the front entrance. I'm in the elevator and DB walks in. I give him a nod and he gives me one back. Then I ask him if he knows what all the commotion outside is. He just shrugs and says it must be someone famous staying there. We get to his floor and he gives me a wave goodbye and exits. My work colleague later tells me that Beckham is staying there based on the pics he saw the fans waving. I look up his pic online and realize it's the dude I was chatting with in the elevator. Nice guy. Lee of Evanescence was absolutely wonderful. Some friends and I waited after a concert for autographs. And prior to Amy emerging, the bouncer type guy laid out in no uncertain terms that we weren't to try to touch her. Well, one friend had depression and Evanescence was one of the things that got her through her teen years. So she broke down in tears when Amy got to her in the autograph line. And Amy just went in and gave her this giant, comforting hug. Hard to do since Amy is so tiny. She was fabulous. I was waiting for an order in a bakery about 10 years ago. Paulie Shaw walked in, looked around in awe at the pies, then looked at me and said, "Look at all these treats." My life was complete. Many years ago, I was in a gallery with my girlfriend at the time, and she said, "Isn't that Lou Reed?" I'd seen that guy at a lot of openings and in fact I'd mentally categorized him as that guy who looks like Lou Reed, but I realized, yes it was. So I told her this. He'd been walking to the door when we said this and had heard us, and he stopped by the door, turned around, crossed his arms and looked right at us. The message was clear. I'm leaving. So if you wanted to say something, now is the time. My girlfriend walked over to him and said, I just want to shake your hand. He said, put it there. And they shook hands and he left. It was really civilized and I always had a soft spot for him after that. R.I.P. Lou. I used to work in a cafe in a very small town in New Zealand around 10 years ago. Billy Connolly was doing a tour of New Zealand. His wife is a Kiwi and he's well documented as loving the place, and it was around the town I was working in. He strolls into my cafe 10 minutes before closing, asking if we're still open. I stand there dumbfounded and just about swore in his face, thinking holy shit, you're Billy Connolly. Of course we're open. He was an absolute delight. Beyond polite. Sat and chatted with a table of local ladies and roared with laughter when they said he should have had his coffee for free. I could buy the place if I wanted to. Why wouldn't I pay for my coffee? He is everything I aspire to be as a human, kind, jovial, hilarious, and clever. Saw Matt Damon at the Guinness Storehouse in Dublin. He seemed like he was doing his absolute best to keep a low profile. So we didn't go talk to him. But he certainly didn't seem rude. Bonus. One of my teammates from college met Ryan lodged after a meet. Teammate was in his hotel room, just hanging out. And Lodge knocks on the door and asks to borrow their ironing board. They let him have it. And a few minutes later housekeeping comes by and asks to see their ironing board. Apparently Lodge had thrown his out the window and tried to take my friends to cover it up. They thought the whole thing was hilarious. So the perception that he's an immature moron is right on then. I once walked outside of my house to run and grab a coffee. As I was waiting at a crosswalk I began to recognize the fellow waiting in front of me. I said, excuse me. I don't know if you know this but you're John Malkovich. And John extended his hand and said, indeed I am, and shook my hand. A kind gentleman he was. I once got a haircut next to Adam Sandler. I was like 11. I said hi and he sort of just glanced at me. I was at a Knicks game and Adam Sandler, Chris Farley, Lorne Michaels and Jeff Daniels were there. I was 11 or so and I walked up and asked for an autograph and they said no. Then my 23-year-old smoking hot sister-in-law walked up and asked them for an autograph and they obliged. She then told them that they were assholes and they should be ashamed of themselves and she gave me the autograph in front of them. It was the week of the 8th of January 1995. Jeff Daniels hosted SNL that Saturday. Edit. I met Rob Dyrdek at an outdoor mall in his hometown back in 2011. At the time I was a huge fan and was even wearing a Dyrdek DC hat. He was there for a family member's birthday so the whole family was with him. We casually went up to talk to him and he was very kind and respectful. He could see that my friends and I were skateboarders so he stood and talked to us for a minute while the dads talked about boats and other dad things. People ran up for quick pictures but he made us feel appreciated for supporting him. He left with telling me, I like the hat. God bless, and they went on with their night. 14-year-old me couldn't be happier. He was as cool as he seemed. My first celebrity experience when I first moved to LA was meeting Weird Al Yankovic. He came in to eat at the restaurant I was hosting at and while his date was in the bathroom before they left he was sitting in this lounging area we had. Being all of 18 and thinking I was playing it cool I asked, so, you working on anything new? Like I knew him personally or something. He just kind of shrugged and said not really and was followed by another 40 seconds or so of awkward silence. He wasn't rude or nice. It was obvious he wasn't in the mood though. Which I totally get now nearly 2 decades later. Bill Murray almost hit me with his car. He did that I'm sorry face people always make when they almost kill you with a car. Do I get a reward for having the most boring Bill Murray story? My sister used to work in a shop which Nicolas Cage sometimes visited. She says he was lovely. Norman Reedus was a pretty chill dude, shared a drink and a story and parted company at the hotel bar we were both staying at. When I met Prince Harry at a bar, He was like an excited Labrador in human form. I used to deliver food from a catering service to the airport for private flights. My favorite encounter was Johnny Depp. Handed him his food and he handed me a wadded up bill. I thought I just got stiffed on my tip. Turned out it was a freaking $100 bill wadded up into a little ball. Legend. I'm a helicopter pilot and had the displeasure of flying Justin Bieber, his father and a couple of his douchey friends. He lives up to his reputation and was incredibly rude. I was personal assistant and driver for John Stamos for a week. He and his girlfriend, the one he's getting married to, forgive me, I've forgotten her name, were the nicest, most normal people. He preferred to handle his luggage himself instead of having me do it. He was very modest and friendly, and had a great sense of humor. His sisters, however, who were also people I had to take care of that week, were absolute nightmares. Constantly asking him for money and acting like they're the important, vain, famous ones. And they weren't. Gordon Ramsay, genuine bloke. Very friendly. True family man. I worked the Sundance Film Festival in the 90s as a projectionist. Samuel L. Jackson came up to me outside and asked for a light for his smoke. We chatted while we smoked. Very nice guy and asked me about my job. Best smoke break I ever took. Another encounter was Lawrence Fishburne. I saw him poking a steamer tray full of salad with a big serving spoon then not take any. Say Lawrence Fishburne to me and I don't think of Morpheus or any other of his great characters. I think of a guy poking a steamer tray of sketchy pasta salad and not taking any. Muhammad Ali, very nice. Gracious. Justin Long, funny. Down to earth and all around bro. Lance Armstrong, deep hole. I worked at a gas station near a music venue and spotted Jimmy Buffett standing outside talking to a ticket scalper. I went out to say hello and he said that he was curious to see how much his tickets were going for. He was an incredibly nice guy and offered to buy one of the scalper's tickets for me. Jimmy Buffett pisses me off. Nobody should have that much success at something they love doing and having such a good time doing it. BTW, if you haven't read his book A Pirate Looks a 40 you should. My ex-boyfriend's mother met Stephen King in the gym. They were the only two people there. When he finished his workout and got up to leave, he couldn't find the exit. Ex's mother says, "Looking for a way out?" King responds, "And we all?" and smiles. "Oh. I forgot. I met Native American character actor Wes Studi in a bar. He was kind of self-aggrandizing. Wes. My next door neighbors. And I went to a cigar bar after the first bar. He was flashing money around. He also ran his hand up my shin and commented, "Someone got waxed today. Whoa. Dude." I've met Dave Chappelle a few times. Nice guy. But he often looked really sad to me. This was shortly before he went to South Africa for his mental health. So I'm guessing my observation that he looked sad was accurate. Most of Reddit is probably too young to know this one. But I also met Jar Jar Gabor when I was a kid. She was an absolute sweetheart. And was very nice to me during a time when I really needed a few kind words. I was sad when she passed a few years back. I have laid eyes on a few other celebrities, but rarely had enough interaction to form much of an opinion on them. I worked at a bar in a restaurant while in college and one night Kevin Hart came in to eat. He wasn't really that famous at the time. I didn't know who he was. But I was curious as I had to go to the stock room to get a $1,000 plus bottle of champagne that he ordered in addition to pouring a bunch of really expensive top shelf shots. His bill ended being well over $2,000. The girl who had his table, who also didn't know who he was, said he was by far the most demanding and rude person she had encountered while working there and that he was extremely demeaning. He ended up leaving a $4 tip. All in crumpled up singles. Duck Kevin Hart. If you meet Stephen Merchant on street, he will speak in a generic foreign accent and pretend he doesn't speak English. Katie Holmes was really nice. Though I met her in 2000. She could have changed. I was turning in my "your table's ready" buzzer at a restaurant called Dockside in Wrightsville Beach, NC. She was picking hers up. I was 10 and the buzzer technology was new to me and I thought it was really cool. So, being the outgoing chatty 10-year-old I just started talking to her. Wow. These things are really neat. You can walk around and it just lets you know when your table is ready. And we just chatted for a bit. I told her she looked familiar. She said she was filming a TV show called Dawson's Creek. I told her that I'd check it out sometime. And she said great. And if I ran into her again, to let her know if I liked it. And winked and said not to be afraid, to be honest. Then I skedaddled off with my family to have lunch. I had no idea who she was. But I did realize something was up when I got swarmed by Wi-Fi'd teenage girls who had been watching me casually talk with a TV star. My really hot friend, and me, because of her, got pulled up on stage to meet Snoop Dogg at a really random, small after hours type show that he was spinning at. Got to say hi and take a pic. I knew I'd never get the chance again, so I asked if I could hit his blunt. And he passed it happily. Even let me hold on to it while he changed songs or whatever, which caused me to get super stoned because I'm a one-hitter quitter. Anyway. Nice guy. Joke's on you. I met Mur from Impractical Jokers just as they were about to start filming a challenge in Union Square. I just shouted out "Yo Mur" and waved. One of the producers tried to shush me and get me to walk away so I didn't ruin anything, but Mur waved me over and let me take a quick picture with him before they started. I love how innocent Mur is. Like he loses so much because he can't be mean or rude at times. Charles Barkley. Nice guy. Got a picture with him. I even unprovoked touched his bicep, for some apparent reason, and he just laughed at me. I was also 11. Al Gore when he was vice president. Not so much his Secret Service. He was out jogging. He actually stopped to talk to us in our car and took our address. He sent us an autographed picture to me and my sister. George W. Bush. I just got to shake his hand. But it was a firm handshake and he seemed to be a solid guy. Probably will get buried. But I met Gordon Ramsay in Cape Town about 5 years ago. He was at a bar. And not a super fancy bar either. I went up and said hello, half hoping he would call me a donut or something. But he was really nice and asked me how I was. I told him I loved his shows and recipes. And he offered to buy me a drink. Overall really nice man. And his demeanor is very calming. I felt at ease. I hope he is doing well.